Hello again, Michael Ware with the Iowa Firearms Coalition. I'm a board member. I'm also doing the Warrior Wednesday podcasts when John McLaughlin isn't doing them. We've shared these duties for a while, and we have another IFC board member. But I wanted to talk with Scotty Volquartsen today, specifically about all things Second Amendment. So let's welcome Scott Volquartsen of Volquartsen Custom to the program today. Hello, Scott.
Hello, Michael. How are you doing?
I'm having a great day. I'm really glad that you're on. Thank you for coming on with us.
Thanks for having me.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about Volquartsen? Because let me pop in here just a second, then I'll hush. When I talk with about people about Volquartsen, it falls into two camps. One camp is like, ooh, I want one of those, or ooh, I have one of those, or they don't know. And I'm hoping to get to the point where it's a household name and everybody knows. So let's see if we can win a few people over from the second camp. So go ahead, will you?
Yeah, we are a second generation family-owned company. My dad started it. He did all things gunsmithing, rifle building, high power. He did everything. And back in the early to mid 90s, he decided as a one-man shop, he had to narrow his focus. And for whatever reason, he chose the rimfire platform. So for the last 30 plus years, everything we've done has been focused primarily on the rimfire platform, 22, 17s, 22 mags. And then even within that market, we've really focused on aftermarket parts for like the Ruger 1022, the Ruger Mark series of pistols. And then in the late 90s, we started building our own complete rifle and pistol, still patterned after the Ruger platform, but just with our spin on it.
Well, what is your spin? I'm curious how you would define that.
Our spin is absolutely no compromise when it comes to manufacturing. So what we do is, for example, all of our internal parts are wire EDM cut. It's not the fastest. It's not the most efficient when it comes to volume. You know, there's MIM, there's cast, there's a lot better options out there. But every time we've gone down that road, we end up regretting it because we realize that's not the best way.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of guys will always say, well, rimfires are fun, but they don't run. Our market or our niche is to get them to run reliably, just like anything else. And one of the questions we get a lot of times is, you know, because we do sell a higher end rimfire product, is do I have to use like match ammo or more expensive ammo? Our goal is to get it to work with just any off the shelf 22, because that's what makes shooting 22s fun. Is it can be economical.
Yeah. Now you mentioned EDM earlier. I know what that acronym means. Why don't you let everybody else know what EDM is and why it's so darn precise compared to the other methods?
So it stands for electrical discharge machining. And the way we do it is we use the wire EDM is a little bit different than the sinker EDM. But the interesting thing about it is a brass wire feeds through the machine as it goes through and cuts the profile of a part. Where in conventional machining, as you know, like if you're CNC turning or milling, that same end mill is being used, or whatever the cutter might be, is being used to cut. So you're going to get tool wear. You're going to get some deflection and all the things that go with that, where the wire, once it feeds through, that's the last time you basically dispose of it and recycle it. So it's constantly that, exactly like in our case, we use a 10 thousandths wire. So it's always being fed through. You're always getting new wire, and there's none of those common, you know, deflection or tool wear or anything like that on these parts. The downside is it is a slower process.
Yeah. When I was experiencing it for the first time in the firearm industry, I want to say it was, oh golly, he's long since passed now. Does Bill Ritchie sound right at EDM Arms?
I believe that sounds right. Yes.
Okay. And of course, my brother was a master tool and die maker, so I knew a little bit about some of these things. And he brought me an article about EDM arms or whatever else. And I said, well, why would you use EDM? I said, aren't these capable in some cases down to, you know, just a few 10 thousandths? And he's like, oh yeah. And he said, well, this guy wants ultra precision, and this is what he's trying to do. And it was my first foray into that, using it for or seeing it used in the firearm industry. And it kind of clicked with me. I'm like, well, that sounds expensive. It sounds slow. But oh, by the way, that would be the maximum result that you could possibly get, unless you found a new way to machine.
Correct. And the other advantage that we have with it is, as you know, machining tool steel can be very problematic.
Yeah.
And with the EDM, the harder material actually cuts better.
Mm-hmm.
So we're able to use pre-hardened material. So it, like for hammers and extractors and stuff like that, it's outside of the speed, it's ideal.
Yeah. I was looking at an extractor last night. My daughter, you may remember this, we talked about this a little bit, but she's running a BRN 22 receiver, but your carbon wrapped Volquartsen barrel. And I believe it was a Volquartsen extractor in there. Or no, it was another company's extractor. Anyway, it was so hard. And of course that sometimes makes these parts brittle. It broke off. And so I was showing her with some sort of borescope. I think I used a really close picture, and she's like, why does it look like that? I said, well, it broke. I said, I assume because it was brittle, because it didn't have that many rounds. But I said, let's get on Brownells and we'll have a couple of these sent in. And she's like, do we need so many? I said, well, probably don't. But I said, your Volquartsen Black Mamba uses the same exact part number. So I said, we'll keep a few of these and put them in your bag, because she's SASP shooting now and doing the action shooting. So I'm like, I don't anticipate these breaking, but I said, we'll have a few spares. And so we decided to do that. And we talked about that specifically. She's like, why does it look so sharp? I said, because the machining's that good. I said, these things years ago were made by hand and made with machine and by hand machine. And then there were places that stamped these parts because sometimes that was good enough. And I said, and now we're trending back on to true precision. And I said, this makes these things work really, really well, so that you don't have cases that stay in there or only make it out half pay or stovepipe. And so there'll be some people that listen to this that understand exactly what we're talking about, and they should, because it's a really, really good way to do the work, but it costs a little bit more. And I'm okay with spending it.
And it's a fine balance. You bring up a good point that if you go too hard with the part, it becomes brittle. If you don't go hard enough after a couple thousand rounds, that point, like on an extractor, will wear over or roll over.
Oh yeah.
So it becomes an issue. So there is a fine line there of how hard, what material, how to harden it, how to temper it, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And on a side note, your daughter wrote me a letter discussing her shooting and the Black Mamba, which was much appreciated.
Oh, thank you very much. She's still over the moon about that. I think it may have spurred some other sales, because some of the other kids, were like, hey, share this. Anybody wants to run it and practice competition, you're welcome to do it. It was a gift to us. We're paying the gift forward. And some of the other parents are like, why did you do that? And I said, why did I do what? They're like, well, my kid's got to have a Black Mamba now. I'm like, well, I don't know what to tell you. Pick up cans, sell your soul. I don't know what to tell you. But oh, by the way, at the end of the day, I mean, yes, a Black Mamba costs more than a lot of comparable firearms. I shouldn't say comparable, but similar firearms. But the fact of the matter is, I think it's easy, if you're going to do this, to justify this in some of these cases, because you talked about this balance of whether it's too hard or too soft. Well, the reason that you're looking for that is to get the most out of that, the most length, the most service, the most performance that you can offer your customers. Well, for a young shooter, for a family, that's fantastic, because now they can use it a lot, hand it to the next kid, take it on down. That kid graduates, grows up, hand it to their kid. And this goes down generationally, because these parts and this kind of quality will survive generations. And there's not that many things that I touch in this industry that are truly designed to do that. So I'm glad that you put that focus on us, Scott. I'm glad that Volquartsen does that, because it does translate into that volume of use. Tens of thousands of rounds of ammunition. It's fantastic.
And we are very liberal with our warranty, that if somebody ever has a problem, regardless whether it's 1, 3, 5, 10 years, like an extractor breaks or whatever, we always replace it. So it benefits us to make parts that don't break as well, because we realize we charge a premium, so we have to replace it. So replacing those parts is not not something we want to do very often.
Yeah. No, I understand. That's a good way to do it. I'm glad you're able to do that. So I have a list of questions. I keep looking over this direction, but is it okay if I ask a few more? Are you all right with that?
Yeah, go ahead.
So you talked a little bit about your origin story. So how have things, I mean, you know how this is. A lot of us start at humble pie, and then we build up and we add and we do what we're doing well, and then we add a little bit. You know what I mean? So tell us what that looks like, or what that has looked like for Volquartsen over the years.
So one of the big challenges for us is when my dad was in charge, it was him and it was going to be family members only. He had a firm belief that if you had your last name on the product, you were going to put a little more into it, which is great in theory. But I also watched mom and dad never be able to take a vacation because when they were gone, nothing got done in the company. So we wanted to expand the company, but yet keep that same family atmosphere and the same pride as if their name was on it. So one of our big challenges was getting out of that mindset that we had to do everything ourselves. And the neat thing is, as we've expanded and been very fortunate with very good people, is you find out when you let people work to their capacity and to their strengths, many times they will do it better than what we thought we could in the first place. So I think that's been the biggest challenge, is us just expanding and being able to put trust into other people that, yes, as much as we think we had the answers, letting people work to their strengths and to their powers ends up making you a stronger company to start from the ground up. And, for us, it's been a challenge because over the years, we've had a lot of people, why don't you guys get into the AR market? Why don't you guys get into this market? And there's times we probably left money on the table by not doing that. But at the same point, we haven't been able to look at other areas and say, what could we innovate that hasn't already been done? Where the rimfire, we know what we're doing. We know what we want to do as far as continual improvement and where we think there's some innovation left.
Yeah.
Which is after being in it for a long time, that's what's fun, is when you're coming out with something new or working on, or even find a better way to do something that we've been doing for 30 years.
Yeah.
That's where it's fun. It's not always just a cash grab.
Yeah, no, I understand.
I mean, I think you completely understand that. Obviously you have to make money to keep the lights on.
Yeah.
But to me, that's not what sustains. It's more about passion and, building something than it is just a bottom line.
Yes. Well, there's always a little bit of room for a tweak here and there. And there are reasons why we do and don't do things. For example, we bought you got your trigger group for that 1022, and we sat it down there. I think it's a 2-pound group, and it's blue. It's very pretty. I'll have to send you a picture of this thing. I mean, the thing it's a work of art now that it's all done. It's fantastic. So we were taking the magazine release, and I don't know the nomenclature, but basically the flares on each side. We were taking those off because we were going to set it the barreled action down inside of a gray birch chassis, right? And so my daughter was like, well, why are we taking all that apart? And I said, well, first of all, it's not going to fit, so you're going to have to do that. And she says, well, what's that? And I said, that's green Loctite. And she said, what's that for? And I said, well, I'm going to put a little drip of this on these dowel pins. And she's like, why? I said, well, these pins locate it and they keep it all together. But I said, I don't want, in case you've got to take this apart at the range. And I said, and you've got to pull these two little, ears off. I would be the first person to lose those two little pins. So I said, I'm going to put a little drip of green Loctite on this pin. I'm going to shove it down inside this flare and let it dry. We're going to come back here tomorrow. And I said, and put them on. And she said, that won't hurt anything. I'm like, no. I said, I don't know if Volquartsen would tell me to do that or not do that. But I'm telling you, I know how this works. And I know that they're going to end up in the gravel or the grass, and I'll never see them again. And I said, so let's do a few of these things and whatever else. And so we walked through that. We cheated. We probably did some stuff we shouldn't have. But it's just, that's what gunsmiths do. We wander out there a little bit. So it's, and every now it works, every now it doesn't. But it's interesting that you talked about earlier about having people on the organization that you allowed to blossom That's kind of, I mean, you didn't say that, but it's interesting that you put it like that. I remember reading a book years ago. I think it was titled Leadership and the Customer Revolution. And I'll never forget a portion that I read. Somebody walked up to one of these great big, hotel properties or department stores, it doesn't matter, and said, where do you find these, truly outrageous service professionals? These people are unbelievable. And the manager's response was simply, he's like, well, we take people that have left other organizations because they were unfulfilled. And then we work very hard to invest time and money into them so they can reach their full potential. And when they do that, they take our business with it. And I thought that was really brave. And I also thought that was very rare. So I'm really pleased to hear you describe it like that, Scott, because almost no corporations that I work with are doing things like that. And it shows a big difference. When I call Volquartsen and say, hey, I'm looking for this, what do I need for that? And what do you recommend I pick up while I'm shopping today? I think was it Nick that I talked to possibly? Victor, sorry. Yes. I should have said, yeah. So I talked to Victor, and he's like, well, I would do this, this, and that. I'm like, great, let's do it. And it's like you're talking to a good friend, because they're not asking you to spend money you shouldn't spend, but they know that this is smart, and this is wise too. And I have enjoyed my interactions calling up and using your customer service. So thank you for that.
Well, and that's a credit to, I'd like to take credit for how they handle themselves on the phone, but a lot of it is to what you just mentioned before. You find good people that are passionate about firearms, and then let them, do their thing.
Yeah.
And that,
it's the same thing in your company as it is at IFC with our advocates, with our volunteers. People are out there working gun shows and events for us. People are out there doing back office work, communications. They're doing blogs. They're working on the site. They're taking care of membership and accounting and whatever else. And what we're really asking them is to what we need to do is invest in them so they can reach their full potential, and they take the organization with them. So it seems funny that when we get out of our own way a little bit, we have more success than what we could have ever dreamed of,
and I think it's almost embarrassing to admit at times, but I think it's our ego, at least in business case. Sometimes it's the ego that gets in the way of, our last name's on the company. We have to know how to do everything to the best degree, which I used to, for probably, 15, 20 years, I kind of thought that, our name's on the business. We have to know how to do everything, which we do have to have an understanding of everything, but we don't have to, we have to allow, the accountants to do what they do, the machinists to do what they do.
Yeah.
The salespeople, and, like you, I read a lot of different books, and one that I always go back to is Jim Collins' Good to Great,
mm-hmm.
where he talks about, you get the right people on the bus, and then it's your job to find what seat they should be at. If you have a good person, maybe they're not great at sales, but they could be phenomenal at customer service.
Yeah. I remember visiting with Frank Brownell one day, and it was the first time I'd met him and seen him and talked with him in small talk, many, many different times, many different passings. And he was listening to me talk with somebody else on the next table over, wherever it is we were, I don't remember. And then I ended up getting up and come over and talking to him. And we had our first in-depth conversation that lasted any period of time at all. And we were probably about 10 or 15 minutes into this. He said, you're a front counter guy. And I said, what do you mean? And he's like, you're definitely a front counter guy. He said, you should be working the front counter. And I'm like, and he knew what my business was and what I did. And I said, well, I am the front counter guy. I said, but I'm also the back counter guy. I'm also the guy in running the mill. And I'm the guy sweeping the floor. And I'm the guy in the shipping department. And he laughed and he said, I know, but you should be a front counter guy. So some of those guys can size us up and figure out where we should be seated on the bus pretty quick. We don't always get to do that when you're running your own business, but that's part of.
I think that was always one of the great things about Frank is he had a way of telling you exactly what you needed to hear, but never in a way that you took it offensive. It was just, he could pick up on that very, I remember being at different shows or different Brownells events, and he would come up and say something. And at first I'd be like, then I'd think about it. I'm like, well, he's 100% right. How did he come up with that in 30 seconds?
Wow, that's savvy business acumen, knowing the industry in and out. And you know how it is when you travel lots of places and see lots of things. There is a knowledge and a base associated with that you naturally take on or you absorb through osmosis or any other way. And he's classic for that. I have enjoyed my conversations with him. I really have. I was going to ask you another one that I had written down here. Actually, it's a two-part question. I'll ask this first. What's your favorite part about doing what you do? And this is a business realm, Second Amendment realm, working with family, friends, kids, whatever it may be. What's your favorite and most rewarding part?
Honestly, I think it's getting email feedback from a dad, a mom, a grandparent that they bought our product and they went out to the range with their son, grandson, granddaughter. And, they've been shooting for 40 years and this brought them back to their childhood. And I think it's building those relationships with those guys that maybe have started with my dad and are still our customers today. And you almost build like a friendship or a relationship with them. Even many times we've never met. Perfect example is we sold a pistol to a guy yesterday. He emailed in and said, "Hey, just so you know, this is my 14th gun I bought from you guys. Give your mom and dad my best. I used to deal with your mom on the phone and I knew your dad did all the work." Like for whatever reason for me, that even though we've grown to close to 30 employees, to still have that bond or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Is like building those relationships is my favorite part, to answer the question.
Yeah, I can see that. I think that sometimes people who aren't immersed in any way, and this isn't to say that you can't be a collector and enjoy this, but the use of the firearm is something different. I think that there are people that look at maybe folks like you, maybe folks like me, and think, well, these guys have something that they have to sell. They have tangible things that they need to move. They have product they have to move. And that's true. We do. But at the end of the day, I think what you're going to find is, and you're touching on it right now. In fact, I think you're encompassing it. It's truly the experience that is valuable. So the Volquartsen Black Mamba was the first pistol that my daughter learned how to shoot. It's the one that you sent to her. Thank you again for that. And we went out together, sighted that in, and she's like, wow. And of course, I talked to Victor and I'm like, hey, what do you recommend I do? I'll get the gas pedal. I'm like, you sure? And he's like, oh yeah. So, so I got some pointers and some tips on some things that might help. We went out there. She had a fantastic experience. And now she's actually she's improving and she's really happy. She's smiling. And now I go do that with her. I'm like, well, the next thing we've got to do. She's like, what's that? I said, well, we got to get a dueling tree and I got to whip you, but it's that experience. It's that shared experience. And yes, there was a tangible piece that was a catalyst for that, but it's not the Black Mamba. With respect, Scott, it's the experience of using it together with your kid and whatever else. I mean, that has been tremendous for me.
And that's awesome. And, it reminds me, we do a lot of range events and we'll get a lot of people who may have never shot or very little experience, or they've been afraid of guns. Mm-hmm. Getting them to, one, be willing to even try it, but then to put a few rounds down range and then be able to hit a steel target or a dueling tree and then watch that smile creep across their face.
Oh, yeah. And
then they'll turn to whoever they're with and be like, well, now that's something I can do.
Yeah.
And I think that's something fun that's about shooting 22s. People always refer to 22 that can be the gateway drug. But, giving them confidence and letting them know there's not a lot of recoil, there's not a lot of noise, it gets them comfortable. And now maybe they'll be comfortable moving up to something larger or more self-defense, whatever it might be. But just to see that smile come across their face, to me, that's what it's all about.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're right. I mean, there's such a high level of potential success when you're shooting rimfire, especially if you're shooting something that has the proclivities of accuracy. I mean, that is great. I always cringe. I mean, I know that this sounds a little cliche, but I cringe when I see the guy takes his wife or girlfriend or daughter or young son or whatever else it may be, newcomer, and they go out to the range. And the first thing he does, a true virgin to shooting, right? And then hands them a 44 Magnum and say, here you go. And they're smiling and smirking at you. And I'm thinking to myself, This is the exact opposite of what you should do. I mean, it would be rare that this person enjoys this at all. And now you're not laughing with them. You're kind of laughing at them. I'm like, no, dude, wrong. Start with something easy that has a pathway to clear and quick success. And they're going to enjoy that and say, I'd like to do this some more. And that's usually what happens. I mean, they move outside of sometimes even courtesy. They're like, mine. You know, they don't want to give it back. I want to keep shooting. Okay, I'll keep loading magazines until my thumb can't do it anymore. You keep shooting.
Exactly. And that's what's so fun about like steel plate shooting is it's so reactive.
Yeah.
And it sets somebody up for success.
Yeah.
You know, they may not be as fast as the people you see on YouTube or Instagram, but to them, to be able to go through and hit 4 or 5 targets in a row, if they've never shot before, is something that will bring them back.
Yeah, I agree. I'm adding your website to the stage here real quick. What's some of the other questions that I wanted to zip down through here with? What's the most challenging thing that you found over here? We talked about some of the rewarding stuff, but what's been some of the toughest stuff for Volquartsen?
I think sometimes I would say one of the toughest things is we're in a very politically driven marketplace.
Okay.
That sometimes, you know, it can work to our benefit when our sales go through the roof. Other times you can go through a lull that, and I hate to ever say anything's outside of our control because I like to feel like you control your own luck. But there's certain times that for whatever reason, you know, some new legislation's passed or something, and you kind of have to reinvent what you're doing.
Yeah.
And so there's that. But I think the biggest struggle that we have sometimes, and this goes back to probably about 15 years ago, and you learn from experience, but you start to believe your own press clippings.
Yeah.
And we thought with what we were doing, we were invincible a little bit. And along came some other companies and competition in the rimfire market. And before we knew it, we had lost all the momentum that we spent years trying to gain.
Mm-hmm.
And it took a lot of soul searching and being honest that they were doing it better than us at the time. And we had to like kind of, well, now you hate this cliche, but, you know, circle the wagons, be like, okay, we need to reevaluate, you know, self-reflect and come back and figure out what we need to do to get back on top.
So you just described, like it or not, the idea of we need to move beyond pride. Maybe pride got us in some trouble. I listened to a sermon by my pastor not long ago, and he started off with that. He's like, well, what is something that tends to trip us all up? You know, is there a common sin among us? That kind of discussion. And I thought, well, you know, for me, it's probably going to be pride right away. But I seriously doubt all these people are going to, you know, raise their hand to that. And he didn't even ask. I mean, he's like, let me help you with that. It's probably something that's pride or pride related for many of you, you know, and I saw a lot of heads doing this. And I'm like, they were bobbing up and down like wowzers. Maybe that's the case. And I took stock of that, Scott. I thought about that. I prayed on that. I gave that a lot of time, and it became self-evident to me that was very true. And so that's part of who I am. I have to caution myself against that. So because it's part of me, it's part of the things that I touch, my business, my advocacy, you know, my parenting, that kind of thing. And so right down to my relationship with you or others. And you've got to be careful of that pride. I get you in a little bit of trouble, but the good news is you can get yourself out of that trouble if you're willing to humble yourself a little bit. You know, ask the question that you had to ask with your family and your business. Say, okay, what are we doing well? What are we not doing well? What had we ought to concentrate on? And what's our future? And evaluate those things.
And we've learned from it. So I think you're 100% right. It's pride that lets it go far too long before you start to ask those questions. We've gotten much better at asking those questions earlier in the process now to try to prevent it from taking place or catching it much earlier.
Yeah.
And it's easy in our business in the firearms industry because there can be some political things that happen where no matter who you talk to, they're selling everything on their shelves. 2020, 21 was a good example where a lot of things were selling, and it's easy to get complacent and think that we're better than we are. Our marketing's better than we are. And then all of a sudden that surge dries up. And now you're like, okay, maybe we weren't quite as good with our marketing, or maybe our systems weren't quite as good as we thought they were.
Yeah. It's you've got to be very honest with yourself, and that's the anti-pride. That's allowing yourself to be humbled, and unfortunately, sometimes we may not be self-aware enough to do that. Sometimes you've got to ask somebody. There aren't very many businesses that truly raise their hands and say, "I want to know what you think." Even if their perception is wrong, it's still the perception that they have. And so it's your job and mine as people who work on behalf of customers and with our businesses. And it's the board of directors that you and I reside on here at IFC. We have to work on behalf of our membership. That's part of what we have to do. And if they've got a misconception, then that's on us to help change that. So perceptions matter. It doesn't matter if they're right or wrong. We have to handle that. And sometimes it involves humility. It hurts.
And that's where I've gone to. I used to deflect when we would get emails or complaints of certain, whether it be products, service, whatever it might be. And about 4 or 5 years ago, I changed my view on that. I said, okay, if they're taking enough time to email us that they had a problem, we need to take enough time to give it validity and say, if that person's emailing, other people are experiencing that same thing.
Yes. How
do we, and you're never going to make everybody happy, but, you just got to look within and say, okay, is this something, do they have a point?
Yeah.
And I found the more that it stung when they said something about our service or our product, the more that it probably was more true than I wanted to admit. Kind of like in life, when somebody says something to you and it hurts and you want to get defensive, there's a good chance that there's some credibility to where that came from.
I know but again, so we're glad to have that. Every time I have an experience, I've had a series of, they're not negative experiences, but I've had a series of experiences and some of them needed a little help when ordering from a major supplier. Well, actually another fellow board member, Pete Brownell. So I've had some of these problems with Brownell's ordering, and then of course their customer service is able to overcome the automation problem, right? So then I will send him a note. This is the customer service rep that I dealt with, Marie or whatever it may have been. And this was the problem that I had. This was the correction. This was how it was handled. It was done so with speed, and courtesy, and them double and triple checking that everything was okay. And then we went about our business, and I'll send him the note. I'll be like, listen, you've got good service professionals, keep them, pay them, and because they're propelling your business forward. And he always takes the time to let me know, thank you. I'll forward this on because we need to know these things. And because businesses can improve. IFC can't improve if our members aren't willing to tell us, hey, I'd like to see this, or I'd like to see that. Or I have a concern with this or concern with that. And you're right. If you hear somebody complain, you've probably had 10 or 15 other people that have experienced the same thing that were unwilling to mention it or simply haven't. So you've got to pay attention to those things.
Yes.
What's a misconception that somebody may have about your business or about what you do? I'm curious.
Probably the biggest misconception is, and we don't get it a lot, but that our stuff is just severely overpriced. That's one. And we can back up the reason we charge what we do is the way we kind of talked about it earlier, but that's probably one misconception. And probably like any other business that I think people think we are much bigger than we are.
Yeah.
Because we have been around a long time, but we've grown very slowly, and that was very intentional as far as the way we added people. But I think sometimes people think we are a much bigger business corporation than we are. But in some ways that helps us, because then when they call us and they get a live person on the phone versus an automated system, or they get an actual email reply and not an AI generated email reply.
Yeah.
It stands out.
Oh, without a doubt. It's funny that we're talking about it quite like that, because I can pull it up here again now. I want to share this screen. And here it is. So I've had people say, okay, this is what I want to do. This is how I want to do it. I want to comp on there. I'll eventually want a suppressor, blah, blah, blah. I need a great trigger, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to shoot 22, magazine fed, all these things. And so I just say, well, go buy a Black Mamba. And they're like, no, I want to buy this gun as a donor gun. I want to have U Smith on it. I'm like, well, I can do all that, and I'm willing to. I'm really, really good at that. But let's say that I tell you to run out there and buy a Ruger Mark. I would prefer at this point, if you're going to tear it down and shoot a lot, you might do yourself a personal favor and buy the 4, because it's foolproof. The others are just fine, by the way, but you've got to understand how the little parts flop back inside of there, and how to make this thing, put it back together. Otherwise, you make a mess. But by the time you buy a Ruger Mark, you do work to the grips, you do internal work. There's polishing and upgrades and trigger packs and parts that need to be installed and tuned. By the time you do all this and you add my labor, you probably would be cheaper to buy one from Scott. And they're like, are you serious? And I'm like, yes, I'm not telling you this because I don't want to make money. I do want and need to make money. But so when you talked about the misconception of price, well, let's be honest about that. If you truly want this outcome, which is precision and performance, and you want it to last as long as possible, then because you're going to shoot it a lot and it's going to last years and decades and generations, literally, then this is what you're going to need. Because if you're going to start with something else and you're going to go buy it all from the ground up, it's going to cost probably that or almost. Now, if you already have, that Ruger in your collection, or you picked one up or whatever else, then okay, come to me and I'll buy parts from Scott Volquartsen and I'll put them in there and smooth the rest of it up and make it work. But that misconception is something, and it bothers me. I'm like, well, if you want this to work well and you want it to work reliably, it's going to cost some money, and that's okay, because again, we're back to the experience.
And there's some things that we do within, like we send off all of our barrels. The breeches get laser hardened. There's a lot of little things that we do to provide those years of durability that are very hard to put into marketing, because the average for a lot of people, they may not even know what that means. And then it gets lost in the copy, and a lot of people don't spend a lot of time reading. Mm-hmm. But at the same point, that's the type of stuff. So we built some test pistols for CCI to test their rimfire ammunition with. They sent us back a barrel that we could examine that had 109,000, like 314 rounds through it. Documented rounds, not us just estimating.
Yeah.
And the breech face, we have pictures of it, looked like a brand new barrel. So those are little things. And that's one of the struggles we have, is how do we market some of that stuff without losing the consumer by getting too overly technical.
Yeah.
But yet letting them know that, basically, in a lot of ways, it's the adage, you're kind of getting what you pay for is,
yeah.
And the other thing that we try to do, and I think you alluded to this with Victor, is we don't try to spend people's money that they may not be ready for. Mm-hmm. We're perfectly fine recommending other people's products if they're going to serve what they're looking for.
Yeah.
Because in the end of the day, the more people we get into our industry, the more people we get shooting, the better off it is for all of us. So there is a thing, I always laugh. If you go back a few years probably a decade or so, when everybody started using titanium for everything.
Yeah.
we had guys, why don't you make your 1022 magazine release out of titanium? And our response was, it serves absolutely no additional purpose than making it out of aluminum for what it does. It's just going to raise the cost. Mm-hmm. And people be like, well, that doesn't make sense. I'm like, we're not trying to just build an expensive product. We do it we're very intentional with what we do.
Right. Well, it's amazing how long some of this stuff lasts. I mean, 109,000 rounds doesn't surprise me, but some people are rolling their eyes like now they can't possibly fathom shooting 109,000 rounds of anything in their lifetime. But some of these things work like that. I've got a old Ruger Mark II 2245. It was laying on the tailgate of a truck and went down the driveway and fell off and skipped like a skipping rock. It looks pretty bad, and I was drilling and tapping the controls with little tiny 10 by 32 taps and then screwing socket headed screws on there to make the controls extended, back in the day before that was even a thing, and I've had that forever. And I want to say, I don't know about I couldn't say documented. That wouldn't be a fair statement, but I know that it's got an excess of 80,000 rounds on it for sure. And it looks pretty rough, dude. I mean, I've had this for a long time. It looks bad. And every now and then I take that out and I show people. I mean, it's got Williams sights on it with super glue on them to keep them so they don't want to pop out because it gets dropped and it sees rough service. And people are like, wow. Why would you keep a pistol this long? I'm like, well, it still seems to work just fine. And it's got a few hitches in the giddy up, but it's rare. And oh, by the way, this is what you can expect if you buy right and treat things okay. They'll last you a long time. And oh, by the way, these things are designed to go a long, long ways. Now, I don't know how much that thing's got left in it. I don't think it's going to be able to hold up to what you're describing. But it's interesting to see that some of these things can actually go that long. And I don't know. It was kind of interesting. We were cleaning Caitlin's Black Mamba and that 1022, or that BRN 22 rather, with your carbon wrap barrel on it. That was yesterday. And I took I've got a Tesla bore scope that I've been really enamored with. It's inexpensive and it works great. And I ran it down through and I showed her and I said, take a look at the way that this Black Mamba barrel looks. Look at the way that this 1022 barrel looks inside there. She's like, well, what am I looking at? And it dawned on me that I hadn't given her any context. I'm like, well, go grab that gun and bring it over here. And I showed it to her and she's like, ugh. And I said, yeah. This looks like an alligator back, and it's because it's absolutely shot up, and this thing looks polished. It's beautiful inside here. And oh, by the way, it didn't take much to make it like that. You dropped your little string cleaner. Well, no, Victor recommended that too, by the way. Dropped a little string cleaner down through there. I didn't remember what brand it was we got from you, and with a little folding T handle, and she pulled that through there, did a great job. And I said, we might have to go through just for the purposes of cleaning the chamber up just a little bit. But I said, this barrel's clean and ready to go. She's like, that's it? I'm like, yes, that's it. And rimfire is dirty, and we're shooting CCI mini mags for it. I think they're 36 grains or something like that, or the 40s. I don't remember which. But I said, this isn't terrible ammo. I said, it's pretty good in the grand scheme of things. But oh, by the way, your gun's going to get dirty. And it cleaned up so quickly and so well. I'm like, this is the mark of quality. You can expect this. And lots of other guns are going to be like that. So pay attention to what you see, because the next time you see it on another weapon, it's probably not going to look like that.
And that's what we try to do. And, it's interesting in today's world. 20 years ago, very few people had access to a bore scope.
Yeah.
Now you can buy them off of Amazon. They may not be the same quality as what you're using or other people are using, but you can buy one off of Amazon and you have just the amateur or hobbyist going through the barrel and checking things out. Mm-hmm. So in a way, it holds us much more accountable than, 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It hasn't been very long ago at all that a really good bore scope was rigid, not flexible, and you could spend a couple $1,000s on. Now you can chop a zero off of that. A couple $100 will buy one that's rechargeable, flexible, that you can take pictures and video with, and actually do a really nice job of rendering images. And you're like, man, this is unbelievable what you can see. Now, I would caution any customer on doing it without understanding the context of what they're looking at. But other than that, caution, great, go do it and use it and understand how these things work. There's no reason not to. And if you pay attention to what a new firearm looks like, and then you clean it wrong a few times at the breech or the muzzle, and pay attention to what those little scars and nicks look like, you'll start to understand how important proper cleaning procedures are and what to do and what not to do. So it does make a difference. It can help you a lot, no doubt.
Yes, it does.
Before we go, I wanted to ask you if there was anything left that you wanted to relay to customers about Scott Volquartsen, about your company, that they may not know, because they should know, if they don't by now, that Volquartsen has been a tremendous partner with IFC. You have consistently sponsored the Second Amendment Day at the Capitol building. You've helped us with raffle items and support for funding the PAC, donations throughout. Volquartsen is one of our premier trusted partners that IFC has, and that has gone a long way. So we thank you truly for your candor and your help and the support of you and your family, and certainly all your people. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Is there something that you want to relay over that you think that people need to know that we haven't discussed?
I think we've covered a lot of it. I'll reiterate that our goal is to get people shooting. So if people have questions, anything related to rimfire, we spend a lot of time on the phone or via email answering questions that aren't even necessarily related to our products. Probably not the best for the bottom line. But, what I've always found is it usually comes back to benefit us in the long run. A person right now may not have a $1,500 22 may not be in the budget. But you never know, 10, 15 years down the road, it might be. Mm-hmm. But our goal is to get people to the range. And for us, it's an honor to be able to help support groups like Iowa Firearms Coalition and other groups, because without that, when everything's going smoothly, it's easy to forget all the work that is done with the IFC and groups like it. But just the number of hours that guys like you put into protecting our 2A rights in the state of Iowa, I don't think people have any idea what you guys do.
Well, IFC's a unique group in that these people are operating, as you know, Scott, on almost 100% passion. They're not motivated by money. They're not being paid. And they're not the beneficiaries, almost never are direct beneficiaries of any of the legislation, in that it helps them from a monetary standpoint. I remember being accused of that when we were trying to pass suppressors. Oh, you just want to sell suppressors. I'm like, yeah, and oh, by the way, I've agreed to sell them at cost for the first year. So, and I was doing the paperwork for free. I'm telling you, I lost more money on suppressors than you could possibly imagine, but I didn't care. I was really, really glad that we got something done that we should have had done years before that. So you volunteer among some absolutely fantastic and tireless people. I mean, they work hard for everybody. And I wish we had a deeper, wider membership that reflected this hard work and all these successes. But, this is the plight of the volunteer group. You work and you work and you work, and you just keep on working. So that's part of it. But we can't do that without support of places like Volquartsen. So thank you again for that, man. I really appreciate truly all that you and those before you have done, Scott. I really do.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I think that we're to a good stopping point. I know I told you that I wanted to shoot for 30 minutes. We're a little over budget, and I've had a few of these go pretty long recently, which has been a lot of fun. So I don't sense that we touched on all the things that we probably could have. Would you be willing to come back another time?
Absolutely.
All right. I appreciate that. We'll look forward to that. Scott Volquartsen, Volquartsen Custom, Iowa born and bred, Iowa company. Tremendous supporters of the Second Amendment across the board, and generous benefactors and supporters right here at the Iowa Firearms Coalition. Thank you. Really,
thank you, Michael.